Hi, I'm Urmi Desai, editor of MoveSmartly.com, and this is the Move Smartly Show. This week's episode is going to be one of our occasional segments where John and I like to dig deeper into a real estate question. Maybe it's affecting Canada or the Toronto market specifically. We call the segment Move Smartly Ideas. And today we're going to tackle the question of why, if home affordability is the ultimate goal, are so many panicking now that home prices and rents are finally falling in major markets in Canada? So, John, are you ready to tackle this mystery?
We're ready to roll.
All right. And before we get going, as usual, if you find our show useful, please like, subscribe, follow, and recommend us from wherever you are listening to us or watching us from. We really appreciate your support. And now let's get on to the show. So, John, today's topic was set up by a couple of LinkedIn interactions. Why
hmm
does it feel like LinkedIn is the place to be right now?
It's
What's going
interesting. I
on?
actually just started getting a little bit more active on LinkedIn. I feel like it's less, I don't know, toxic when compared to Twitter. And I don't even mind the trolling so much on Twitter, but people's names are tied to their account. It's just more professional. There's more discussion. It's a little bit more interesting. So yeah, I've been getting a little bit more active on LinkedIn.
I don't think you're the only one. So let's start with an observation you had about an interesting post today. I'm just going to read this post here that's on the screen. Charles Maron writes, just build more homes and prices will come down. It's the theory shaping housing policy across the political spectrum. Upzone, deregulate, streamline permits, get out of the way, but let the market work. Supply and demand, simple economics. And here's the question almost no one asks. What happens when prices actually start to fall? Because that's not a hypothetical anymore. It's happening right now in places like Phoenix, Atlanta, Dallas, and Miami. And the reaction hasn't been celebration, it's been panic. In fact, that fire alarm is panic. I don't know if you can hear it. Continuing, builders are walking away, lenders are tightening, policymakers are scrambling to prop the system back up. If falling prices were the goal, this would be a sign of success. But the system we've built, our entire housing finance model, can't tolerate prices going down. The deeper truth, our housing system doesn't run on affordability, it runs on asset inflation. And you picked up on this, John. And I just find it so interesting that Charles is actually writing from the United States. He's a founder and president of a group called Strong Towns, and it's looking for more fairness in housing. Now, I've just found that really interesting. You've been talking about this, but
100%.
this comes from the American perspective. And you then commented in response, posting this right up here, Canadians have been sold the same myth. If the cities just get out of the way and let builders build, 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 prices will fall, rents will drop, and affordability would return. But now that prices are finally softening, we're seeing what really happens. New home sales in Canada have collapsed to their lowest level in decades. Builders are pulling back. Policymakers are worried, not celebrating. Falling prices and rents should be a sign of success. Instead, just like in the US right now, they're being framed as a crisis. Because the truth is, we haven't built a housing system designed for affordability. We've built one designed to preserve rising home prices at all costs. Very interesting, John.
hmm So yeah, I mean, again, I think it's interesting seeing these narratives coming from the US because in the US and Canada, as I said in this post, I think we've all been sold this same, I mean, what I think is a completely BS narrative, quite frankly, um, which is that, and think about the narrative we've been hearing up in like the past few years. This is the narrative from CMHC, from housing pundits, that builders want to just build, 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 unleash supply, drive prices down, make rents affordable, make prices affordable. But cities are in the way and there's red tape and there's home building's illegal. And this is why home prices are so high. Like, this is the narrative. I mean, I'm not making it up. Look at any report over the past 3, 4, 5 years. The entire YIMBY movement, the Yes in My Backyard, is built on that narrative. The premise of the YIMBYs is not, well, if we just build more homes, home prices are still going to keep going up pretty rapidly, but not as rapidly. Their whole argument is prices will fall, homes will be affordable, right? So they're not arguing prices are going to keep trending up out of reach, further out of reach. Their argument is that builders are going to unleash supply, drive prices down, and it's just this happy utopia, right? And this quite frankly, if you look at, and I think we may have talked about this on the show before, but when CMHC relaunched their, and I think we've talked about it, their housing supply study, like
Yes, it's not just YIMBYs, it's our housing
it's our
experts.
government housing agency. I think 2022, and then they came out this report. It's like we need to
Mhm.
triple home building in Canada to reach affordability. I mean, that's a very catchy headline, but what people missed in the details was that their assumption was that builders would continue to rapidly increase the supply of homes in an environment of rapidly falling home prices, right?
Well,
And
this show didn't miss that. That was my very observation to you.
yeah,
It
you
was
talked about
in spite of a 33% drop in prices in Ontario
yeah.
that would return us to some kind of affordability metric. I said, John, who would build if home prices were down across the board 30%?
Well, I mean, again, I think CMHC just assumed the benevolent builders would just keep building in an environment of falling home prices. And we're obviously seeing, I don't blame builders. Builders are, okay, this is the problem. The economists, the CMHC, the housing supply experts, they're coming from a point where they believe that the home building industry is an industry that they're supply maximizing. Their incentives are to build as much as possible, which is not the case. They are, like most private businesses, profit maximizing
Mm-hmm.
enterprises, not
Well,
supply
back to your other comment that you
maximizing.
made in the great sell-off, homes aren't widgets for this very reason.
Yeah,
There's two ways to maximize your profits, but falling price margins aren't a way that motivates house builders.
exactly. 100%. And so what is happening now that prices are falling and cooling?
Mhm.
Home construction stops, right? And
Come
this
to a
isn't,
standstill.
again, this is the problem with, again, I'm an objective person. I listen to everybody, but some of the arguments are completely BS, right? When you listen to the arguments from housing experts in Ontario, they'll tell you, oh, they're stopping in Ontario because of Doug Ford's policies and not unleashing supply and getting in the way and all of these ridiculous ideas, quite
They've
frankly,
even
because,
turned on Doug Ford's red tape.
huh?
They've even turned on Doug Ford's red
Oh
tape.
yeah, yeah. They're hey, listen, they hate Doug Ford. All of the housing supply people hate Doug
We're in
Ford.
that phase. Wow.
Yeah, but listen, they're not just falling in number one, they're not just falling in Ontario. Housing starts are falling in BC, and BC has launched the kind of the most aggressive YIMBY, yes in my backyard, housing density policies. We had the housing minister on our show. They did a lot of policies that were celebrated, and yet still, despite these policies, housing starts are slow in BC. And even in the US, if you mentioned some of the cities there, many of those cities, Phoenix, Atlanta, Texas, those are all cities with few restrictions on the supply of homes. They're supposed to be the areas where housing's abundant.
Famously so.
Exactly.
They've been
And
cited as examples
exactly.
on the
And
show.
yet again, these markets where supply can just flourish is where housing starts are falling, right? And again, they're falling not because of government restrictions, because prices are falling. If you look across Canada, if you look at where housing starts and new housing are actually trending up, they're trending up in virtually every other province other than Ontario and BC. And not because of housing supply regulations, they're trending up because prices are trending up in those regions. If you look at Alberta, if you look at Quebec, home prices, like existing home prices, are actually increasing in those provinces. They're not trending down or staying soft, and they haven't declined 20+% from the peak the way we have in Ontario. So it's easy to build new homes when prices are trending up. It's obviously a lot harder in an environment where prices are flat or are trending down. And we're seeing that. This argument that politicians and housing experts have been pumping for the past 5+ years, that builders want to unleash supply to drive down prices, is nonsense. Maybe that's the academic theories, but that's obviously not how the real world works. And we're seeing those ideas collapse right now, right in front of us.
And yet, some would argue, John, that government restrictions are still the problem. So I'm going to point out some other LinkedIn posts
Sure.
which kind of argue about solutions. And I think they're back to the get the government out of the way.
Mhm.
So the first solution, which is fascinating at a time when Canadian polling suggests that the majority of the country is kind of soured on our great immigration surge experiment. There are a group of builders. Here's one from Mirabella Development Corporation calling for more foreign buyers again.
Mhm.
Real estate. At some point, we might want to consider that investment from abroad is fundamental to growth. The consequences of restricting foreign buyers is devastating to our economy. Moreover, it has done zero to make housing even more affordable. So, a call back for foreign buyers. Again, another commentator here. Canada needs to stop prohibiting non Canadians from buying residential property. Currently, this ban is set to expire on Jan 1st, 2027. It needs to be scrapped sooner. So, John, you're saying it's falling prices. Maybe it's that we're restricting a really important buyer.
I mean, these are all obviously complete nonsense arguments. So why, and we got to think about why are they making them? And I mentioned this in a vlog this week. The builders that are making these arguments because they want or they need to sell at peak prices at 2022. They're not selling product because they don't want to sell at today's lower prices, prices that are arguably more affordable for Canadian households. They want to sell at the peak prices. And their argument is, well, you know what? If Canadians don't want to buy our product at these elevated prices, let's sell them to someone who does. Let's sell them to offshore companies and let them buy our homes. Now, I mean, we don't need to be scholars to understand why they would want that. I mean, of course they want that. They want to maximize their profits. They want to maximize business. The question is not, is this in the best interest of their companies? Because obviously it is. This is why they're advocating for it. The question is selling off Canadian homes at elevated, unrealistic prices, obviously, for the domestic market to foreigners in the country's best interest. And I would argue it's not. When you have Canadian households trying to buy a home of their own, and they can't because house prices are so unaffordable. How is it in the country's best interest and the next generation's interest if we are selling our homes off to foreigners? And the most interesting thing about this is if you follow people online, the builders and all these other people, they're framing they're trying to frame these foreigners as like saviors. Like we need them. They're going to pay our prices and rent them at a rent that's not economical, and they're saving us, and they're doing this charitable service to our country by paying us these ridiculously high prices and renting it at these low prices, and they're going to save our market. This is how they're actually trying to frame the narrative. But again, this is not a solution. Selling our homes off at elevated prices to foreigners does not help the next generation. It does if you believe, again, the CMHC, the YIMBY economists, that any supply is good supply. Doesn't matter who owns it, what they paid for it, or how it's financed, which is basically what Canadian experts have been saying for years. So if you believe that, sure. But I don't believe that. So I don't believe that. I think their ideas are a bit half baked and kind of one of the reasons why we got to this point where we are now. And they're just trying to put a band aid on a bigger problem,
But
right?
it's a band-aid that we've tried already. And this is what I find this argument so interesting. It'd be one thing if Canada had a history of not relying on foreign buyers or making this play. But in fact, we forget why the ban is there in the first place. It
Yeah.
led to overheating in the market, and it did not result in falling rents. It
No, it's
resulted in
higher
political
prices.
unpopularity.
Exactly.
And that's why politicians moved to then ban it. And again, I go back to this environment right now where a lot of Canadians are wondering about how, our immigration and other foreign policies are working right now. There's a lot of fear right now about whether we need to become more sustainable as a country on our own industries and what we're producing
100%.
at home. So I think that's very interesting. And for them to spin it like we haven't been here before. What is
Exactly.
that amnesia about?
Well, I
Because
mean,
we've done
listen,
it. This,
it's
we're not a country that hasn't tried this.
it's it's not amnesia. Their business is frozen, right?
Mm.
They're laying people off. They can't afford their debt payments. They're leveraged. They're doing whatever they can to start their projects. Okay. And they basically, the reason why they have to sell at those prices, quite frankly, is because it's not economical for them to build without those prices. They paid a certain price for their land, expecting to sell at a certain price. And now that prices have fallen and they can't achieve those prices, you're not going to build, right? So I understand where they're coming from. I don't blame builders. They want to make money, but their solution is not it's a solution in their best interest, obviously. I don't think it is a solution in the country's best interest, and it's certainly not a solution for the generation that is shut out of owning a home of their own. I don't think it's a solution for that. I think it's just a band-aid that's going to help their business over the next 2, 3 years.
So we understand why they want us to think another ride on that merry-go-round would be
Hmm.
great. We were all familiar with it. And then all the average buyers get flung off
Hmm.
as the speed of the price increases take off. What will happen though? Do you think politicians will be swayed by these calls right now?
It's interesting. In my vlog this week, I
Hmm.
actually argued that I think they might.
Mm.
And why do I think they might? Because uh the building lobby is quite big, right? Uh, I think the government is concerned, potentially concerned. Again, like nationally, we still have a decent number of condo or units under construction. Not as many condos, more purpose-built rental. But if things look bad a year from now, right? And construction starts are plummeting and it's leading us to recession. I do think it's a high likelihood of our government doing that. And again, I mean, at least in my blog, I mentioned that I think they can do that partly because Canada, for the most part, at least from my experience, is a nation that doesn't really push back too much. We grumble a little bit. We might get a bit upset if they announce it, but we don't take to the streets. You know what I mean?
Well,
We're,
we
we
grumble
don't
a lot more, but it's become even more passive. It's all below the line comments now.
exactly.
It's
So
it's not in the streets, but people are angry, but it's not manifesting
no.
in necessarily punishing political parties.
And
But John,
I'm
are
gonna
you also
I'm gonna add
sorry.
that I think the other reason is they can do what they were doing when our population was hitting 1.3 million people per year. Okay,
Mhm.
what did they do when our population was exploding? They got a bunch of housing experts to go out and tell the entire country that this is normal, that this is sustainable, that the only reason home prices are skyrocketing is not because of our population growth. That's that we can manage. It's because of the cities and the red tape and the supply constraints. This is the narrative up until 2024 when the federal government pivoted, right? So when you have economists kind of pumping out these misleading narratives, which I think are like they're not honest arguments, but they're designed to confuse people, quite frankly. When you have a housing expert saying, oh, yeah, 1.3 million people's fine, we just got to triple housing completions tomorrow. And the reason we can is because Olivia Chow and all the other mayors are restricting housing. You're confusing people. The narrative isn't as black and white, right? So tomorrow they're just going to hire a bunch of housing experts and say, oh, yeah, we need foreign buyers. Trust us. We're the experts. We got PhDs. We know what we're talking about. More supply is in your best interests. And I think this is the other reason why they can get away with it. There's tons of people that can be hired to make that argument. And I think many of them actually believe it.
So this gets me thinking, actually, John, it's not just us misunderstanding that houses behave like widgets.
Hmm.
I think we think governments operate like normal businesses, and they don't.
No.
They have one incentive to get elected, which is to respond to the anger over high home prices and make a lot of promises
Hmm.
and high rents. But then when you're in business as a government, you need that tax revenue, don't you? And maybe you need that donation from
Yeah.
all the industry, the builders. And maybe you're worried about the GDP slip from the revenue you get from that part of the industry and even
Hmm.
the jobs.
Hmm.
So then you're kind of perversely incentivized against the very thing you may have been elected to do.
Yep, exactly. And listen, and don't get me wrong. I don't think everyone's, if they went down this road, they're necessarily all these evil people. Like at the end of the day, the government does have what has some reason to do it. Like I said, if construction starts or plumbing, it's a very big component of our economy and it has ripple effects. So they would have reasons to be concerned about plummeting new housing starts. That is a very valid concern. I just don't think opening up the floodgates to foreign investors is the right way to address that concern. I think it's an easy way to address it. It's a shortcut. It has little friction. Governments don't need to do anything. They don't need to spend any money to do that. They just let the private sector solve itself. So I get why they would do it. I just don't think it would be the smart approach.
Back to the Hunger Games. So another idea being pitched on LinkedIn, I'm going to pull it up here, is that government is still in the way because of the fees and development charges and other taxes charged on builders when they build homes. So we have a prominent commentator here saying governments are trying to make housing more affordable while simultaneously increasing housing starts. But recent GTA or Greater Toronto Area experience shows that it's impossible without substantially lower costs. First place to start, lower taxes on new homes. So this is another idea that a lot of builders and their experts have come to get behind. What's the
Uh,
problem with this solution, or do you agree with it?
is that Mike Moffat? It sounds like Mike Moffat.
Yeah.
um, listen, I think okay, Mike is one of these big build advocates. The whole build industry is sort of making this narrative. And you have to like, I think about these issues. Rewind the clock 3 years ago when Mike and all these people were writing these reports about tripling housing completions and build. And the only issue is red tape and all of these things. And if we just unleash supply, builders will keep building and drive prices down. And none of those reports, maybe they talk about modifying it, but they didn't talk like, and I think he's talking about slashing taxes to the tune of like 20% or something like that. So, or something major. And again, to understand this, like if you follow the building industry will argue that taxes, all taxes, not just GST, like development charges, like all combined make up. I actually think when they talk about this, they actually talk about like income taxes as well. Like they talk about all taxes, okay? I think that every tax, not just building taxes, they talk about all of their taxes. So if you actually look at how they measure this, so they say taxes make up 30% of the cost of a new home. Okay. So if you have $1 million home, 300,000 of that is tax. It's a little bit misleading, like I said, because they lump every tax in there. But for builders to start selling, they would have to dramatically reduce the tax, price on those units. And I think what the building industry and Moth and all these public are significant tax cuts. So, for example, slashing that from $300,000 tax burden to like a $100,000 tax burden. That way, the builder can sell the unit for 800,000 rather than $1 million, right? So, again, this is. I mean, I'll try to unpack a couple of things on this. Number one, when we were promised by these housing experts 2 years ago or 3 years ago that the builders want to unleash supply to make homes more affordable, slashing taxes significantly wasn't part of the plan, right? They're proposing it because home prices have fallen, right? But slashing taxes that significantly are again band-aid solutions. Okay, great. So taxes now only make up 10% of a new home's build. What happens tomorrow when prices fall another 10% or 15%? You can only cut taxes so much. These are short-term fixes for today's, again, slowing market. And it is not even a national problem, it is a regional problem. It is specific in Ontario And in BC, where home prices are falling, do we need to somehow taxes aren't a big burden on housing starts in many of these other regions, right? GST in particular. So we're taking a local problem, making it a national one for some odd reason. But again, you can only cut taxes so much. These are like short-term fixes. Now, having said all of that, is there space to lower taxes? 100%. I mean, development charges skyrocketed, especially in Toronto, not because the city is evil, just because prices skyrocketed and they wanted their piece of the pie. Everyone's framing this as the city's the villain. The reality is, when development charges skyrocketed, when prices were skyrocketing in 2021, people didn't say, "Oh, we're not going to buy condos anymore." Investors just didn't move to the sidelines and say, "Oh, this price is too high. The city's development charges are the barrier. I'm getting out of the market." They didn't. It was because the market was driven by speculation. I think this is the problem that the whole industry is missing. This is the why we're in this stupid crisis. Okay? The taxes weren't a burden 3 years ago. They're a burden now because the speculative demand has disappeared. So again, I think the problem is structural. The entire new housing industry was driven and by speculation, and they're actually trying to get back to that model, right? Now, Moffitt's arguments a lot of times are misleading because the federal government removed HST on first-time buyers, right? Which is great. Seems like a good plan. Moffitt's in the build industry, like the new home industry, is like, oh no, we should get it to apply to all end users, right? What about the seniors buying homes? And this sounds like a morally just argument. Why would we discriminate against the senior citizens who need a home? But here's the problem, and they know the problem. Virtually everyone who is buying a 500 square foot condo in downtown Toronto said that they were an end user, but obviously weren't an end user. And they said they were end users to get the tax break, right? They weren't senior citizens buying 500 square foot condos, and they weren't a family of five buying a square foot condo for their principal residence. They were maybe seniors in a family of five buying it as an investment property, but not as their principal residence. So unless you're able to kind of close this tax loophole, what the building industry is talking about is really just setting up the foundation for the next round of speculators, cutting the price for them, making real estate speculation more attractive to build, build, build. And where does that get us tomorrow? So again, they're all talking about band-aid solutions for like very narrow problems in specific regions that are only going to get us back to the same problem we had before, which is a housing market whose foundation is rapidly rising prices and prices needing to increase indefinitely. So I don't tend to agree with a lot of what Mike says or the building industry because they advocate for what is in the best interest of builders, understandably, but that doesn't necessarily always line up what is in the best interest of consumers
And
and
if you want to more
households.
charitably say that some, including younger advocates, let's say of YIMBYism and other things, are just hoping for a solution to the housing affordability crisis, I think their criticism of wishful thinking may apply because if we look across to Arizona, Phoenix, Dallas, these are not high taxation areas. They're known for the opposite,
Mhm.
actually, and for allowing building to be free. So
Exactly.
the complaint or the criticism is not being answered. And I think are advocating for the building industry. I do think there's a wave of people who think we got to try something new. Which is we've never allowed everyone to just build everywhere and not tax them. But I find that funny that people think that because it's not true.
Mhm.
We
Well,
have. Like
when
there are markets to examine.
mhm.
So I
Oh,
wonder why
100
that
markets, yeah.
thinking persists.
Mhm.
Is it that those that are pro building find it very easy to market to today's younger frustrated home buyers and kind of convince them of this argument? I think that's possible.
Well,
You know,
that is what they, yeah.
yeah, like I can understand if you're a frustrated younger buyer who wants to just get in, you're willing to try any new solution, right?
Well, I mean, the whole building industry, listen, I don't the building industry, quite frankly, is quite brilliant because they have cooked up this idea, okay, put forward by experts that they're desperate to unleash so much supply to make homes and rents affordable for you, and like the evil cities are in the way, and they have an army of young people taking to the streets and lobbying for them and spending all this time, they're free as unpaid lobbyists, okay, to advocate for the builder's best interest, okay. And now when the builder wants to continue to sell at peak prices, what do they say? Well, you know what? We don't really care if you can buy the home. We'd rather just some offshore investment fund buy it. Like, I don't know if I was that person advocating for them. I mean, I'd feel slightly betrayed, or am I wrong? Like, you feel like the truth is coming out that the industry is not here to drive down prices, right? And it's not to say that some of these pro-density policies are not good. They are good. You know, the city's legalizing sixplexes, more density in the cities. Those are all good policies. But this premise that the building industry wants to drive down prices is obviously a little bit misguided. They're profit maximizing businesses. They want to maximize profit, and I don't even think they're evil. Like a lot of people, a lot of progressives frame builders as they're not evil. They have a
Mhm.
business to run. You
And if
know,
you incentivize if you incentivize anyone, whether it's an individual, a speculator, or a business, or even the president of the United States, the wrong way, and you cannot blame them for then taking the incentivizations offered.
100%.
That's everybody, that's the whole model of capitalism, the rational actor.
Hmm.
What I find very interesting, and it's not just young, I should say, frustrated would-be buyers, it's a lot of experts. Abundance was released from the prominent journalist Ezra Klein and his colleague. There's a lot of people falling behind this argument, this idea that especially in very wealthy liberal cities, for example, it's gatekeeping, it's people who say they want affordable housing but block developments and things from going up. But what's interesting about that is I'm not seeing a critique of areas where there aren't as many zoning restrictions. And again, we're talking about Texas, Dallas, all these areas, and why there's no evaluation there of why some home prices continued to climb, even in these areas where those zoning restrictions didn't exist. So
Hmm.
it's almost like everybody's rallying at a pet peeve in their city
Hmm.
or their region,
Yeah.
but they're not using that factor and then taking it as an analytical model and then applying it to housing and trying to say, well, what is the most powerful indicator
Yeah.
of what will happen next?
Yeah. 100%.
Right? It's a
Yep.
lot of wishful thinking. And I think even the reason why some people, and we know Australia made this play about 15 years ago explicitly, there's still this idea, okay, foreign buyers will come in, they'll
Hmm.
build the housing stock that tomorrow's workers need once they get old enough to be in couples and buy the house, then the house
Hmm.
will be there.
Hmm. Yeah.
And there'll be no asset inflation.
Hmm.
There's no phenomenon of people parking their money in homes and
Hmm.
that rising faster than any other category of asset,
Yeah.
much less income. All of that is ignored, even though
Yeah.
these trends have been there quite prominently for the last 10 years. So
Yeah.
again, it's like there's a lot of wishful thinking. And yes, I'm being kind. I think there is a lot of course, just, self-interested thinking, and that's not wrong. But what's really troubling is it's wishful thinking in the absence of obvious examples where this did not happen over and over and over.
100%.
And that's what I find very confusing.
It is confusing because even if you look at, like you talked about Abundance, which was, just got released. And again, this is very much a YIMBY book. And if you look at the markets that are the theoretical utopia, markets like Houston and Texas and Austin or whatever, home prices skyrocketed there over the past, like skyrocketed over the past 10 years. And, the Yimbys will say, well, you're not looking at the counterfactual. Like maybe they would have gone even more rapid if we didn't have these policies. But this goes back to my point. The whole framework of abundance is that prices should not skyrocket. It's not
Mhm.
that they're going to still skyrocket, just not quite as much. It's that abundance keeps prices relatively flat, right?
Yes.
and it's not happening. And especially like in Austin, like if you follow some people on Twitter, and it's very misleading. Like they tweet these charts about supply in Austin doing its thing, and they show price declines over the past 12 months. But they of course ignore the hockey stick appreciation over the past like 10 years or 8 years, right? So it's and really what's happening in these markets is like a normal boom bust cycle, right?
Hmm.
Like they had a skyrocketing growth. They built a ton of homes. Now construction stopping because prices are falling.
Oh, wait, where else is that happening?
Yeah, well, exactly.
It's not, you're right. There's such a desire to think there is such different performance in different housing markets right now. When the
Exactly.
story of unaffordability is sweeping across Canada, the United States, Europe, many other like, you could say the other Commonwealth countries,
Yeah,
Australia, New Zealand, is a ubiquitous story.
100%.
And yet there is this feeling that right over there, they're doing better than me. And like, it's so easy, right? Because you look at the prices in Dallas and they're so much cheaper than Toronto.
Yeah,
But we all know it doesn't work like that,
of
right?
course.
But
Yeah.
there's something about thinking about housing. Um, maybe we miss Daniel Kahneman because there's something about thinking about housing that really destroys our ability to analyze it
100%.
properly, numerically, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's so much anchoring
There
or
is anchoring.
just
Yeah.
being swayed by the last thing that happened to you. What do they call that? The last
Recency,
event bias. Yeah.
recency bias. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's just so much going on with us mentally
Yeah,
that
exactly.
makes it very hard to analyze housing in a more neutral way
Yeah.
across many environments to say, well, what is the key driver? If I had to pick one correlative factor, is it zoning for affordability? And right now it seems like no, when prices go high, they go even higher because everybody wants in.
Hmm.
And that seems to be one of the biggest uniting stories. But it seems that we're resistant to that story.
Well, no, 100%. I think people want simple stories. And again, I think at least in North America, a lot of housing policy or whatever is driven by like urbanists, by these houses. I think that, these people who think that if you build the types of homes they have in Barcelona and France,
Hmm.
in Ontario and in Canada, North America, housing will suddenly become so abundant that home prices will not have to be at the same level as Barcelona and Paris. They're going to be like Buffalo, New York prices because we'll just unleash so much supply. But of course, it doesn't work like that.
They
I
need a
mean,
time machine.
yeah,
You
exactly. It
needed
doesn't.
to have gone back and built
Yeah,
those massive abundance flats, which many of them were nation building projects
yeah.
funded by governments and other
But
things.
I
Hardly,
know, but
right?
those
Hardly
nations,
funded by capitalists looking for a place to build their profits,
100%. But
right?
those nations, and again, I think the issue is in North America. Everyone thinks it's the issue has to do with the type of home we build,
Right.
and and if you look at those countries, they also have their massive affordability issues, right? And again, I think density is positive. I think moving to a more dense type of housing, but it doesn't necessarily lead to the most affordable market. I mean, it's going to lead to a more livable city, a more functional city, more
But
people
in
in existing
theory,
neighborhoods.
yeah, but here's my frustration.
Hmm.
Where has condo development been stronger densification than in Toronto, Canada?
Hmm.
We have one of been the last 15 years has been a story of densification. We're
Yeah.
still pretty flat,
Hmm.
but the rate of change in Toronto knocks the charts off.
100%.
We have friends in condo development when they go for conferences and they hear how many units are under
Yeah.
construction in Toronto, it blows people's minds in
That is,
Miami, in New York, in all these cities.
and that's,
And so again, we've done it. We've done it and
yeah.
it still didn't bring the prices down. And
And
this is what
that's,
I find so interesting.
And that's the weird thing about when you
Yeah.
hear all these people talking about densification and
Hmm.
and abundance. If you look at the cities in Texas that they say are the utopia of home building and abundance housing, they're actually pretty freaking flat. They're sprawling. They're less dense. No matter how far you go, no matter how many kilometers you go out, every distance, there are fewer people per square kilometer in those areas than there are in Toronto. So it's actually less housing, way more sprawl, so way less density. So it's very odd. I don't know.
And
Some
we even did. So what I'm trying to say is, I'd love to invite them down here. We did the density, but what happened? Investors shaped the product, and we were just talking about that with Puyan
exactly.
last week. And that did not result in the kind of Utopia Barcelona flats where you can raise 2 or 3 kids
No, it
because they're
didn't.
big and spacious. It did not result in that.
They gave us 500 square foot condos, tens of thousands of 500 square
That
foot.
nobody wants.
Yeah.
So I just find it so interesting that people can still be so gung ho when I
Yeah.
look out my window and see a literally built example of that not
Yeah.
working.
Exactly. I mean,
And yeah, the myth
yeah.
is strong, right?
Yeah. And I mean, to circle it back as we wrap up, I mean, I
Mhm.
think we're not, uh, the solutions aren't easy. So I'm not going to sit here and kind of wrap up. Yes, it's easy to kind of criticize a lot of the ideas that come out.
Sure.
It is a lot harder to come up with a solution, but I think my starting point is that we don't want half-baked solutions, band-aid solutions that are just going to result in the same problem. The interview we had last week or 2 weeks ago, I can't even remember, with Puya and the developer, we
Mhm.
talked about structural problems
Look
with
at the
the
whole system.
100% with the
And that
way
was
condos.
Charles's opening comment. It's the system that's doing this.
Exactly.
There's no evil people in here. It's
Exactly.
this system.
Yeah.
The system's rewarding us, and we're all acting accordingly, whatever role we play in the system.
Yeah. So his ideas like that talk about structural issues in the way we finance housing and the way we think about housing, I think will drive us towards a better path than trying to find this band-aid that gets us back to this speculative bubble demand, investor-driven demand we had 5 years ago so that good times can start again, which is basically what the building industry is trying to do. And I think this is where we're not building a housing market where homes are for shelter, you know what I mean, for the next generation to have for their future, for their family, whatever. We're treating them and looking at them as these assets that, if Canadians can't afford to buy them, let's just sell them to foreigners. Right. And I think it's a terrible vision
I
for.
think they're looking at it as a product to be shifted at all
Yeah,
costs now at the highest price point. They're almost in the luxury bag model,
exactly.
you know. But you're right that globally housing is an asset, and that's why people buy bags and watches because they
Hmm.
retain their value, and now houses are just one of those things. But yeah, I really liked your observations. Like, I'm nauseous. I don't want to go on that merry-go-round again, and I'm confused why so many people are so easily convinced by these arguments. But you
Listen,
know,
people listen to experts, right? And if
yeah.
you have a
And
PhD, if
some
you
of them make sense. Like, I have to say, like, there's no merit in over regulating, over taxing, being
no.
inefficient as a government. You will never see us advocating for that, ever. But I'm just dismayed because if we get this wrong again,
Hmm.
we're just going to end up with another real estate run
Hmm.
full of another mess again.
Hmm.
And that makes me so scared and so sad
Hmm.
because every time we re-enter a speculative bubble, we don't just reset and come back.
Hmm.
It always ends up a little higher.
Yeah.
You start from a bigger gap and a bigger gap.
Hmm.
And I just don't know where that ends.
Yeah.
And, growing inequality, go to some countries that are developing. It causes a lot of social instability, violence, unkindness. It's the absolute worst. And I think a lot of us need to think about that in cities that aren't quite there yet, but we're heading there.
100%.
Right. Okay. On that cheerful note, I hope everyone enjoyed our
Of wealth
Apocalypse
inequality and
Now.
instability and
Apocalypse Now edition of Move Smartly Ideas. Thank you as always to all our viewers. If you agree with her, if you disagree with us, please leave your thoughts and comments. John is on it's Twitter at John Pasalis. The show is at Move Smartly. Please respond on our podcast. You can leave comments on our YouTube channel, and we look forward to hearing from you. And we'll see you again next week.